Welcome to the Bellevue City Council Extended Study Session for January 20th, 7th, 2020. Our first order of business is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. So next we have communications written in order and in oral. We'll ask you to come up in the order that you signed up, and once the timer turns yellow, I believe you have 1 more minute left, and when it's red, the time is over. So who is first on our list?
We have 3 people signed up to speak. So our first speaker is Alex Zimmerman.
Okay, Mr. Zimmerman.
So what's up? Nobody wants to speak on it? I'm only alone? What's happened with Bellevue? Everybody start acting like a rabbit? Okay, no problem. Sieg Heil, my Nazi, Gestapo anti-Semite pig from Animal Farm, a fascist and killer. My name is Alex Zimmerman, I'm president of Stand Up America. I want to speak about something what, as I see right now, go worse and worse every day. About fascism. This fascism starts from Seattle, because Seattle have right now only one party. It's a Democratic Party. Right now, this moved to King Country, because King Country right now, approximately everybody Democrat too. And in Bellevue, I live in Bellevue for 25 years before. So this make me confused, because one-party system is always fascism. So guys, I spoke right now to everybody who live in the city, approximately 150,000, and probably half from this 150,000 pure freaking idiot. Because I don't understand why you vote for Democrat who want more taxes, more trouble in everything. One spent for sound transit $300 billion, taxes everything. We have a problem with everything right now. Egg, what is I buying Fred Meyer for 30 years for 99 cents right now for last couple of months costs $2. Why? Inflation only 2%. This is exactly what is happening right now with everything. So my question right now to this freaking idiot, I can use more heavy word, but I'm not too much sure this against Constitution. Yes. This freaking idiot who worked for Democrat is supposed to be sense voting for Democrat. When you're doing this for many years, last 20 years, they exactly will come to absolutely power. Absolutely power is absolutely corruption. You're supposed to be vote for people who make your life better. Nothing happened. And right now, Seattle and King Country, include Bellevue, control all 7 million people. It's a problem what is we have right now. So right now, people never have opinion about what is need doing. It's not because I don't like Democrat or I don't or I'm Republican. I'm not. I support Trump, but for different reason. It's about how many idiot you elect, so make us life miserable. I never see better right now, and I live almost 35 years here. So where is the problem? Can somebody explain to me, for example? They prosecute me all time only because I have different opinion. This fascism, what is we have, is more dangerous than Nazi or commie fascism, because we have a republic, constitution, and freedom of speech for 250 years. It's no analogy of this kind of fascism, what is Seattle spread right now, all state, and exactly in Bellevue. So, guy, I speak right now to everybody. Stand up, America. We need something doing about this. It's not about Republican or Democrat. It's about idiot who right now control everything. So please, go back.
Mr. Zimmerman. Who's next on the list?
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Vernon Schrag.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Tell me when I can
You
start.
can
Oh, I'm
start. Go
starting.
ahead.
Okay. I'm Dwight Schrag. I live in 1106 108th Avenue Northeast, downtown Bellevue. My wife and I have lived in Bellevue more than 15, probably less than 25, somewhere in there. We've lived downtown for 15 years. So I came tonight in support of your discussions that you're going to have about 2020 priorities for our city. And I would like to give you my support in looking at public safety as one of your topmost priorities and think about how that will play out in coming years. So last week at the council, I did provide you a list of insights from your constituents, and I'm sad to report that not one person that I talked to over the last 3 months could tell me anything about any policies for public safety. I know you heard lots last week, but people really do not know about it. So I would just encourage you to take a hard look at that as you meet together in your retreat. So my personal experiences over the last 8 years tell me that public safety is still an issue downtown. Most recently, January 10th, I was standing on the corner across from Whole Foods with 2 people waiting with me to go across to the light. I didn't know them. We were accosted by a person who made death threats to us as we stood there. He had a machete. I didn't know it. I couldn't see it, but I was right up there. I knew with his death threats that he intended to take us on. So I decided that I would tell him I'll call 911, and if you guys can't resolve your differences in a different way, we'll have to do something about it. It set him back and he left. I asked the people why they were not going to call 911 because they were directly in the attack zone. They said that the police or Bellevue knew about the man, but he would be leaving soon. Turned out he was in the parking lot earlier with a machete scaring people, police calls and so on. I called the police and I got a 15-page report about the man. So I believe he's been known for some time in our city and shouldn't be out there. The city resolution that people have been asking for is very important, and I encourage you to look at it in detail and follow through on it. And I urge you to look at the little analogy of sports at the bottom of the page that I gave you attached.
Thank you, Mr. Schrag.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have one more speaker.
Our final speaker tonight is Carrie Kravitz.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, City Manager Miyake, and council members. I'm here tonight to introduce myself to you all in my new role. I'm Carrie Kravitz, East King County Community and Government Relations Manager for the Port of Seattle, and I'm located here in Bellevue at 300 112th Avenue Northeast, number 100. At the Port, we are excited to be kicking off a monumental year, and with this newly created role, I'm charged with ensuring that Bellevue and the entire East Side are connected to the Port's assets and our programs. Obviously, you have your own resident Port expert here, but I'm going to give you a quick highlight of some things that are going on with us and reintroduce all of you to the Port. We were founded in 1911 by a vote of the people as a special purpose government. The Port of Seattle's mission is to promote economic opportunities and quality of life in the region by advancing trade, travel, commerce, and job creation in an equitable, accountable, and environmentally responsible manner. Here are a few highlights of what we're actualizing in our mission in 2020 and how we're supporting economic development here in Bellevue. So we know a thriving regional economy depends on a well-run airport and seamless connections across the globe. And as such, we have more than 100 projects underway to make major improvements in customer service and traveler experience. In fact, last Wednesday, we launched our new era of customer-centered travel and unveiled a new SEA brand identity and suite of improvements that reflect our Pacific Northwest home. As the 8th largest airport in the country, in 2019, the airport saw an unprecedented 51,829,239 passengers, and we expect that number to continue to grow. On the maritime side, we've committed to establishing Washington as a global leader in maritime through commercial fishing, cargo shipping, cruise, recreational boating, and maritime industrial development. The Port of Seattle and local maritime industries make our region more globally competitive while focusing investment towards environmental and community health. Currently, we are making the largest investments in maritime that the Port has made in a generation. Together, our airport and maritime investments make us one of the largest builders in the region, with a $3 billion 5-year capital plan. $3 billion 5-year capital plan. All the port's growth and development is approached and executed with our commitment to the environment and equity. 2 values I know that are important in the city of Bellevue. The Port of Seattle targets its investments and programs to reduce the impacts of development and protect our natural resources. As environmental stewards, we embrace our responsibility to our citizens, the livability of this region, and to the future. Additionally, through our Office of Social Responsibility and our newly created Senior Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, the Port endeavors to be a catalyst for equity and social impact throughout the Port and in the communities we serve. As you can see, we have a lot going on at the Port. We look forward to working together with all of you this year and the years ahead. And throughout the year, we'll have some opportunities for all of you to come tour the airport and highlight some of the projects going on. I'll work with your staff to get those scheduled. And lastly, I want to remind your team, I know you have your economic team coming up later, that the deadline for our Economic Development Partnership grants is coming up on February 27th. And we look forward to continue to working with the City of Bellevue and your economic development team here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hold on. Okay, I would like to take us to council business and new initiatives. We had 3 things that we wanted to talk about tonight as council members, and I will start with Council Member Lee to talk about the groundbreaking that we had at the Islamic Center East Side on, was it Saturday? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last Saturday, I think 4 of the council members, Mayor Robertson, Councilmember Stokes, Councilmember Zama, I don't think you were there, yeah, and I were in attendance for Islamic Center's groundbreaking ceremony. And I'm really happy to report and note that, Bellevue City has shown tremendous initiative and sympathy and action. That's more important. I want to emphasize the word to help the Islamic community after a number of years ago, when as we knew that there was a very unfortunate and under very unfortunate polarizing atmosphere that their facility were burned, to ashes. So the thing that happened afterwards, followed the situation by the community in general and the city of Bellevue and by, council members were very demonstrable as a wonderful, I believe, show of support and welcoming and understanding the importance of we all are living as one people, one race. And they emphasize, because the Islamic Center is a religious institution, it's all one race under God. There's no difference. When something happened to one of us in the community in Bellevue, which is consists of many religions and cultures and from everywhere, we believe that we are all affected the same way. So I think all the way from council members, I think including Mr. Stoke and the council, obviously, the police, the fire, and the city staff, Mike Brennan, helping how to rebuild the synagogue. And more importantly, I think the neighbors, the churches right next, nearby. There's the Church of Latter-day Saints, and the neighbors, living in the apartment close by, and they all rose up and came to lend their support. And the word they use is our love, really. It's really the most important thing to show. Oh, that I forgot to mention, including City Manager Brad Miyake. Everybody reached out, very much so from top down to bottom. And so I think this is really not just talking about it, not just saying, well, we need to all be living in peace or in love, but actually demonstrating. And I don't think many people, are not, reading the newspaper, talking about it, seeing it happening every day. You know, you don't, but things are happening. And the people that came to speak, there's over 100 people in attendance in a very rainy morning, but everybody was there. So I think by the speeches made, by the people who showed up, by the actual action that we witness and we see what's happening, I think that really proved again Bellevue is a city and with action. But you know, as we all know, it's just a small piece of it. It's not enough. We need to all be doing that, not just when there's a problem that happened, not just when somebody got into trouble and then we all rose up to do one project. But I think that needs to be something that we do every day of life. Think about it. We are one race, in love, all working together as a city of Bellevue. So I was very touched. I appreciate the mayor giving me the opportunity to tell you what I feel about this this project, and thanks to all the people that are involved, demonstrating, actually doing something in love to help our neighbors, help ourselves, basically. So
Great.
that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, and then Councilmember, or Deputy Mayor, sorry, new in House, if you could talk about the Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Absolutely. I
Is
just
it a
want
day?
a brief statement here, but today we remember the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz and mourn those murdered within its fences. It's International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and we mourn the genocide deaths of 6 million Jews. We should always remember the suffering, pain, and loss, and salute the perseverance of so many in the face of so much persecution. It's 2020, and unfortunately, anti-Semitism is still a pervasive plague on our society, and it's on the rise. We have a responsibility to remain vigilant against hate, bigotry, and discrimination in all its forms, because bigotry shows us how easily a hateful ideology can lead to targeted violence. Thus, it's critical that we educate our children and future generations about the atrocities of the past and the importance of never forgetting acts of injustice. We must stand firm against all forms of evil and violence. We are at best when we stand together and work together to create a Bellevue for all, where everyone has an opportunity to succeed and to live with freedom and dignity. This day of remembrance strengthens our resolve to realize that vision. Thank you, Mayor.
Good, thank you very much. Okay, and then Councilmember Zahn, if you could talk about the Lunar New Year.
Yes, so last Saturday, January 25th, was the Lunar New Year, and it is for the Chinese zodiac, the year of the rat. And so I thought that it was important to acknowledge that Lunar New Year did just happen, and with a city in Bellevue where 37% of our residents are of Asian descent, I think it's important to celebrate along with our neighbors, both ones that are of Asian descent as well as everyone else, so that, because I think that the more that we connect as people and build relationships, the more that we see each other as people, and hopefully the kind of things that Deputy Mayor talked about is one that won't happen, because we actually see each other and we celebrate all of our diversity and our differences and our cultural events. So I invite those that have time this weekend. There's an event celebrating Lunar New Year at Bellevue Square on Saturday, and then on Sunday at Bellevue Botanical Garden, there'll be a second event as well. So that'll be a good opportunity to bring your family and celebrate along with us. Thank you.
Oh, great, thank you very much. Okay, City Manager, I believe we are on to our Economic Development Plan update.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. Tonight represents the fifth of 8 discussions regarding the updates to the city's economic development plan. This subject was last in front of the council back in December of 2019, where the staff were joined by the consulting firm of the Avalanche Consulting, who shared some of their preliminary findings with the council at that point in time. Much work has been done since then, and tonight discussion will focus on some more of the key findings developed by the consultants with regard to some of the data analysis they've done. This is really just an information only. We're not looking for council direction. This is really to update the council. And joining us this evening is Jesse Canuto, our Chief Economic Development Officer, and to his right is Philly Mars, Economic Development Manager. So Jesse, I'll just turn it over to you.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council. We are very excited to be here tonight for the 5th of our 8 engagements on the Economic Development Plan update. We've been doing a lot of work with Avalanche in the background, and so with that, Philly will take us through.
Great. So back on December 22nd, our consultant from Avalanche Consulting were here to introduce themselves and present the high-level first impressions from their initial research. Tonight, we will let you know where we are in this update process, as well as go over some highlights of the key findings of the data analysis report. We are progressing nicely on the plan update process. The consultants have been in town twice now to conduct stakeholder outreach from the data analysis that we are presenting to you tonight, as well as input received from the series of stakeholder interviews and focus groups. Avalanche is starting to draft those concept strategies that we will present to you at the end of February. Again, back in July, the council approved 8 objectives for this plan that included support of the creative economy, small business, and retail, as well as supporting capacity building efforts and integrating new businesses into the community. Additionally, this plan will integrate key tourism recommendations from the Destination Development Plan and support workforce development initiatives. Lastly, it will be a chapter-based plan, so it will be easier to update in the future. These objectives will lead to the direct strategies of the plan that will be tackled specifically by economic development staff, but we also have heard a lot about transportation and affordable housing challenges, and those will continue to be addressed in the foundation strategies of the plan in alignment with other current city plans addressing those needs specifically. Which leads me to the informational review. A goal of this plan was to be comprehensive in drawing from previous studies and planning efforts that relate to the objectives of this plan. We are conscious to not duplicate efforts that have previously been done, but instead build upon those in this amazing list of previous work to ensure that the strategy aligns with other city efforts. So again, the stakeholders have been in town twice, and through that they've interviewed 20 stakeholders to understand the needs and opportunities that should be addressed through this plan. Additionally, the consultants have facilitated a series of focus groups around the topic areas of retail, creative economy, small business, as well as capacity building. These focus groups were held in December and then reconvened in January to flesh out the opportunities for potential strategies. We casted a really wide net for engagement, including businesses both large and small, residents, nonprofits, service providers, and partner organizations. And so far, we've had direct engagement with over 70 participants. We are also working with a fantastic group of department directors led by Deputy City Manager Kate Behrens, who are providing us with valuable insights to help guide us through this process and the deliverable. And in addition, a group of subject matter experts across departments are assisting in providing information and insights across specific topic areas. And so far, it's just been a fantastic team to work with. And with that, I will turn it over to Jesse Canedo, our Chief Economic Development Officer, who will dive into some of the key findings.
Thank you, Philly. Members of council, Avalanche has done a great job of summarizing their initial findings. You can find part of that as an attachment to tonight's presentation. But in summary, they've confirmed what we have suspected for quite a while, that Bellevue is becoming a true global business hub. And that is largely due to its reputation as a great place to do business. We are a very highly educated community and drawing from a regional labor pool. Affordability of commercial and residential space continues to be a challenge for our residents, our workers, and our businesses. That is especially acute with the traditional portion of the creative economy, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. And their high-level recommendations are looking like they will revolve around continued investment from the city and our partners in placemaking, connectivity, and the enhancing of cultural assets to make sure we continue to be the place that residents and businesses want to be. Through all of the stakeholder engagement, both interviews and focus groups, they have continued to see these three themes repeatedly emerge on the screen. So connection, communication, and collaboration. They see some gaps that the city and our partner organizations may be able to fill and help facilitate additional work in these areas. Connecting residents, employers, and community groups is an especially important task in the time of such rapid growth for a city and region like Bellevue and Seattle. They also see some opportunities in facilitating new or enhanced communication of opportunities. There's a lot going on in the city and in the region, and sometimes just with all the noise, it can be hard to get a grasp for what specifically you should be paying attention to. And they also see some opportunity for the city or our partners to be directly collaborating or facilitating major projects and major programs in the city and in the region. So a really quick note about the data and methodology. So as Philly mentioned, they have combed through many reports and strategies that the city has conducted. They also did an independent review of data. But as we all know, data can vary. It's not always kept in a uniform fashion. So because of the variety of sources, both local, national, and the different ways that it's been cut across different reports and strategies, we've had them working with local staff to make sure that they're interpreting data as we prefer to have it done in Bellevue. But just for that reason, we want to make sure we note that there are some places where data isn't always uniformly available. So there are some places where data is comparing us to certain benchmark cities, and in other places it's comparing us to local peers, just for those reasons. But we've been working very diligently with them to make sure that they are following our best practices. And that is why the stakeholder engagement is especially important, because it's the storytelling that helps flesh out what happens with the data. In terms of industry cluster analysis, the folks at Avalanche did a cluster analysis similar to the one that was in the current 2014 Economic Development Plan. The market has changed significantly since that time. The previous scan included the recession, so many of the industry clusters on the screen have shifted to the right and up, meaning that they have grown and improved their location quotient in Bellevue. The notable exceptions would be aerospace and clean tech, which have experienced a decline since 2012. That is largely due to changes in the market. For example, Boeing shifting an increasing amount of their back office operations out of the region has led to fewer Boeing workers or aerospace workers in Bellevue. Three areas of core strength have really emerged in this data set. So information technology continues to be one of our very strong suits. The real estate services cluster has grown significantly over the last 5 years, as well as the business services cluster. So those areas are places where we're doing especially well and where the market seems to be doing a good job on its own. Because we are doing well in those three areas, tonight we're going to take some time to focus on two opportunity areas, which are retail and tourism, which also align largely with the objectives that Council outlined for us in July. So first we'll dive into the retail sector. So no surprise here, retail is strong in Bellevue. We are a large regional destination and the second largest producer of sales tax in Washington state. The high per capita retail sales produces a really good return for the city and provides a strong revenue source for the general fund of the budget. As we dive into the subclusters of retail, we see that there are clear areas of strength for Bellevue, including car sales and luxury goods like jewelry and leather. Those are areas where we distinguish ourselves within the region and the county. Auto sales in particular comprise about 40% of retail sales, and they are growing very rapidly. We also see a reflection in the data of national trends like the decline of department stores and office supply stores, which is not necessarily alarming for us, but it does provide some new opportunities. So, common feedback with stakeholders and during routine business retention work with the community has shown that Bellevue is a strong retail destination, but there is an increasing preference for more local retail, independent, only in Bellevue type locations. So the mix will be a question for the future. People are looking for more shops in places that resemble Old Main in Bellevue or that resemble Market Street in Ballard. In addition to all the fantastic work that's going on at the Bellevue Collection and the Brave Room. So we do see some opportunities as well here to grow Bellevue's identity in areas like fashion and clothing and outdoor-oriented retail like sporting goods and other places. Within this, a possible strategy that might come back from Avalanche for the council's consideration would be around building a series of district-based retail strategies to help us close gaps and ensure that we have the right retail mix in individual neighborhoods and districts of the city. The next area we'll take a look at, as mentioned, is going to be the tourism cluster. It's the second opportunity area that Avalanche has outlined for us. So in the years since 2013, tourism has grown fairly steadily in Bellevue. That has been thanks to the very strong demand on the convention and corporate side. We do have a lot of business visitors that come in for Microsoft, Concur, formerly for Expedia, and the convention center does have a robust and growing amount of business happening. As Visit Bellevue has noted, including in the Destination Development Plan, the city does less well in the leisure sector. So in those folks who are traveling for pleasure rather than business, we do see some gaps in that market. That is reflected by lower weekend rates at the local hotels and lower occupancy rates at the hotels as well. When we dive into some of the subclusters within tourism, we do see that Bellevue is underperforming in this particular area. Despite the strong growth in hotels and restaurants, we still have 10% fewer food and beverage places than in the US average. Arts and entertainment and recreation also comprise less than 13% of spending in this category, which is much lower than for our peer set. This does track with feedback that we've received through the stakeholder engagement and through our normal line of business with businesses that Bellevue does lack strong nightlife and culture options. So that does track very, very closely. One possible strategy that may come back from the consultants could be something like growing the number of local restaurants and beverage establishments. There has been a particularly strong request for places like wineries and breweries in Bellevue. And when we talk about opportunities for food and beverage, it's something more akin to the Optimism Brewing in Capitol Hill. For those that are familiar with it, it's not just a brewery, but it's also a community space. There are children's birthday parties that happen, watch parties for sporting events. People will come in to socialize with their neighbors and their friends. So it's less of a hardcore nightlife option and more of a neighborhood establishment. So that's what the type of recommendations that Avalanche is considering at this moment, based on the stakeholder input. Next, we are going to take a quick look at the creative economy because it is related to the arts and culture section that we see in the tourism subclusters, and an area where we are underperforming. Because of the, sorry, lost my spot. We do want to make sure that Bellevue has a very strong creative sector. This is a key component of economic development. And there are two major categories within the creative economy cluster. There is the digital creative economy, which is software, video games, much of the modern tech sector falls into that category. There's also the traditional sector, which is more of the artists, musicians, galleries, things you would associate with an arts district type of destination. And within that, we do especially well in the digital area. It shouldn't be a surprise. Software development, video game development is very strong in Bellevue and is a growing sector. So we do very well there. In fact, it makes up 91% of our creative sector, which is very different from our competitive set. The 5 peer cities that we are benchmarking ourselves against each have a significantly larger or smaller sector of the digital side. The traditional cluster, again, which makes up sectors such as artists, musicians, galleries, dance studios, etc., are less than 10% of the creative sector in Bellevue. Again, this does track largely with feedback we heard both in the focus groups and through our normal engagement with business that Bellevue does have some room to grow in terms of our cultural offerings and our artistic offerings. We did want to highlight this because the traditional creative sector does have a strong bearing on livability for our residents, in addition to the strong attraction factor for our businesses. There are some challenges with affordability, workforce, the usability of existing spaces in the city that we may be able to help with and that Avalanche is analyzing right now for possible recommendations. Because we do promote ourselves as the cultural heart of the East Side in addition to the business heart of the East Side, this is also a particularly strong area for growth. Next, we'll take a quick look at the small business and entrepreneurship side. As we expect, data shows that Bellevue is a very inventive and entrepreneurial community. The number of patents issued to Bellevue residents is approximately 13.5 per 1,000. That is the second best in our competitive benchmark set and one of the highest rates in the nation. And just for emphasis, those are patents issued to Bellevue residents, not to Bellevue companies. So that should be a very strong pride point for the community. Additionally, Bellevue does still have very many small businesses. Despite our reputation or our branding as a corporate center, 97% of our businesses still have fewer than 100 employees. And 12% of local households report self-employment income at an average of about $66,000 per year, which means that there are many, many residents in Bellevue who are doing consulting work, who are doing micro businesses out of their homes. So there is a strong entrepreneurial bent in the city. And there is strong demand to grow that more. There is also an opportunity here for additional storytelling and improved marketing, again, as we're still perceived to being home largely to large corporations. So that is an area that Avalanche, again, is analyzing for recommendation. On the front for workforce and talent, this has been a particularly tricky issue. Workforce is complex. Data alone doesn't give us enough to build the strategies, which is where the feedback from our local stakeholders is very important. This is especially true in a community like Bellevue, where our workforce is so regional. The majority of Bellevue residents work outside the city, and the majority of jobs in the city are filled by non-residents. So it's very tricky to how we analyze the different data and commuting patterns. We do see that among Bellevue residents, this data is for residents only, we are the third best educated city among the 200 largest in the country, which should be, again, a very strong pride point for the city and the community. Nearly 70% of our residents hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and those education rates are on par with cities that have a university in them. So it does show that Bellevue is a strong attraction and is a place that very highly educated individuals want to be, which is a good place for us to be from a workforce perspective. There is the other side of the house, which is we do have many workers who live outside the region. So regional issues around transportation, affordability, upskilling are extremely important. A possible strategy that may come back from Avalanche could include something like the city or a partner organization providing stronger coordination with Bellevue College and other organizations in the region that are doing retraining and talent development work, like Amazon's Upskill program or T-Mobile's Reach Hire, which are both focused on local populations, and being able to make stronger connections there between residents and those training opportunities. We also held a focus group focused on capacity building because it was an area of interest to the council and to the community. Across all of our stakeholder engagement, we heard a very strong desire for growing our local organizations to reflect the needs and services required of a modern Bellevue and a growing Bellevue. This includes opportunities to grow or build capacity at our nonprofits, community organizations like the Downtown Association, and arts organizations that can be stronger advocates for the artistic community. In several focus groups, discussions started about the need for more regular meetings or forming new partnerships, which was interesting. Many of the participants in our focus groups mentioned that it was often the first time they had been convened for these types of discussions, and so some natural networks began to form in those meetings, which was very heartening for the staff to see and witness. The consultants will be helping us identify how the city and our partner organizations can best utilize the energy and excitement in the community for capacity building, and how we can best foster these connections and growth, understanding there are a lot of demands for a growing city like Bellevue. So to wrap us up, in terms of strategic themes, again, as we've seen over the data, all the focus groups saw a strong thirst for connection, communication, and collaboration, for the city helping to align and focus some of our common goals, and for helping bridge some of the capacity needs to help us build the Bellevue that we're all hoping to build.
So what's next is in February 24th, we will be back and we will present the draft strategies for council feedback. And then we will have Avalanche back in town in March, who will present the draft plan.
Great, well, thank you, Ms. Martin. Mr. Tomato, so what would you like from us tonight?
So tonight, we would appreciate any feedback that you have, questions you have on the data, or any questions you have around the focus groups, or any feedback in general.
And if we have, like I do, big comments, can we email them to you or to Avalanche directly?
You can email them to me and Philly, and we'll make sure that they get to Avalanche.
Okay.
So we
great.
can track them and make sure they're resolved.
Okay, thank you. So questions and comments, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I think it was really good and very exciting, thanks, to see this as it's developed. I did have a few things that maybe other people noticed. I thought they've done a very good job of the data. What concerns me a little bit, there are a couple of places where they seem to miss some things, and I hope that doesn't mean they're missing some other things. One of them is, I was reading through that, and having done a lot of work with Bellevue College and all, it surprised me to see that their perception was at Bellevue College, and they kind of dismissed it because they only give 2-year diplomas. That's not correct. I mean, that's a pretty basic piece to miss. And the other was kind of not quite understanding what GIX is, and that seems to be something to be looked at. And the other was, I'd like to see a little more emphasis on education and what is in Bellevue, and recognizing there are things, and they recognize some of the regional pieces, but the Lake Washington Institute of Technology, University of Washington Bothell, Eastern Washington has a presence at the campus, and with Bellevue College, and even what's going on in the high schools in terms of technology and those pieces. I think I'd like to see a little more focus there, more focus on startup incubators, and the other one, which I noticed on the capacity building, they're listed homelessness and poverty, and education in terms of is something in terms of youth needs is formal, but there's more to it than that. So there's not any look at human services and how that factors in, and what Bellevue is doing on those areas that have a great effect on livability and economic development. And I'd like to see a little more in that. And the last, I'd like to see a little more exploration of why we don't have more brew pubs.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Robertson? Sure.
Thank you so much. So I'm curious about the retail, where it shows that we are maybe underperforming in the retail. Since sales tax now is paid in the place where things are delivered, and more of us are getting things that are delivered, does that feed into the data?
That does.
Because I would think we'd have huge growths in retail. I mean, just based on my ordering alone.
Mine too.
Exactly. I mean, how is that factored in? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So Avalanche and our finance department did work to make sure that those online sales were counted. So all of the ordering that's happening, and which is proven also by the recycle section in my apartment.
We got to get Amazon to have all recyclable packaging, and that's another story. So
it is factored in, but it does show that there's growth in things like areas like clothing and some sporting goods. So that is contributing to the growth numbers here.
Okay.
So again, we're largely doing well, but there are some areas where we're just the retail is not keeping up with the demands of the city, at least the part that's local.
Yeah, people want those little shops. I get that. Yes. I think that's great. And I thought the department store information was interesting because that I thought we were immune to some of the national trends with how well our shopping centers are doing, but maybe the department stores within the shopping centers are underperforming. Is that what the data shows?
That's what the data would show.
Okay. So on tourism, I think that's really interesting. We definitely want more weekend hotel visits. I know that we do have a number of people that come down, particularly from British Columbia, to shop on weekends. When we get the Regional Aquatic Center, that's 15,000 hotel room nights a year. That'll be a lot of weekends there. So it'd be good to have some strategies in particular on how to fill those hotel nights on weekends. And hopefully Avalanche will know about some of the things we have in the works, like the Grand Connection and the Aquatic Center. One of the things that I know the council has focused on, which I didn't see, but it may come in the strategies, is we need to, of course, not rest on our laurels, but continue to nurture investment coming into Bellevue, but also existing businesses so that they can grow and succeed. And one of the things, or one of the, I don't know if it's a specific sector, that I think is going to have a hard time succeeding in the future, we need to keep our eye on that. And that is those services like auto repair and that sort of thing, which rely on lower rents. They're not in the Class A retail space. And how we're going to make sure that we continue to nurture those so that we have those in our cities, because those are real amenities for the people that live and work here, not having to drive to Duval to get their car fixed, or whatever. So, of course, there's always all those car dealerships, but, that's another story. So, finally, I just wanted to, one of the things I think that, this is more of a comment for the council, that I think that why we're getting so much investment in Bellevue is because the government has shown itself to be incredibly stable, and we are setting the table and helping to helping to I said local government. Local government. No, yeah, the Bellevue, the local government, the council, the city government, our city manager, so that we're not getting in the way of these businesses being able to invest and succeed. And I don't know if that can be wrapped in a strategy, but it definitely, there's a there, right? And so it's something we also need to keep our eye on. Thanks, I look forward to the strategies.
Thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, thank you. It looks like there's been a lot of work done. I really like reading through the industry scan. That seems like really good stuff. I do see that I agree with some of the trends that were identified in there, and I wanted to highlight that because I do think it's important that we are, compared to our benchmark city, performing much better in many, many areas, which is great. But there are a couple of areas that are a little bit concerning, which is that we have less economic diversity than the benchmark. We have less occupational diversity than the benchmark. And it leads to some of the discussions around workforce development. So I would like to understand more about when we talk about 70% having at least a bachelor's degree. What about trade school and career and technical education? Because it seems to me that then feeds into having much better occupational diversity in the city. And then some of the comments in there about the creative economy really struggling to stay in Bellevue. So we're trying to attract more arts, more, brew pubs and community spaces and those little local eateries that define Bellevue. But at the same time, our bread and butter right now seems to be much more high tech, right? Really high educational attainment. And somehow it seems like we need to find a way to broaden that piece. And I think it'll lead to those conversations around, and it was also said in there about transportation infrastructure, the fact that most of the people that live here don't work here, and that people that are coming in or coming in from other places, making sure that we're investing adequately in transportation infrastructure and housing at all levels so that we're actually able to have a community that is diverse and has an opportunity to be a startup, start a small restaurant or a local business. And as part of that, that partnership then with the business community and the landlords to really look at, maybe it's those tenant spaces are really much, the storefronts are really much larger now than they need to be. And so is there a way to reduce the rents because the spaces don't need to be as big? So I think there's lots of exciting things that I look forward to hearing about. I think we're on the right track in terms of looking at these pieces and engaging with the community so that we're all in this together. And maybe we'll have some more microbreweries in our community too. There are actually a couple that are in Bellevue. I know we like going to the Resonate. It's not maybe exactly the same as a microbrewery, but it's definitely a community gathering place that people really enjoy. Thanks.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Nieuwenhuis.
Thank you, Mayor. Great data. It's really starting to come together. I look forward to seeing more of the actual strategies and execution of this plan as well. Just a couple of highlights that I just noted down. A big piece of this, one of the strategic themes here is about communication. And I cringe every time I read an article on GeekWire or the Seattle Times that says, Seattle suburb. Instead of just calling out Bellevue. And I really just want to emphasize that because whenever I see Bellevue actually in the headline, I think we're making progress. And that's when we're becoming that actual global hub. That's when we're on the map because we're actually seeing the name Bellevue, not Seattle suburb. And that's a way we really start to differentiate ourselves. So I'll be very curious what kind of, because there was multiple mentions in here about different strategy without specifics. So I really look forward to seeing that because for me, that's a real hot button one for me because I really think all these other things are not going to fall in place unless we're able to effectively communicate that message about who we are and what we do. I mean, I love the fact that we're part of the Innovation Triangle, for example, but I also get concerned that we get clumped into this east side, strategy, which, still makes a lot of sense. But again, I think for this piece, for this economic development plan, we really need to highlight Bellevue. So that was one comment. The other on the traditional creative economy, and I think there's plenty of support amongst the council here that we're all concerned that the numbers are not great for that traditional creative economy. So I would really be interested in other ways that we can help foster, support that community, other than supporting them financially, but other things that we can do to help benefit them, because I hear that a lot, and that's really important to all the be it small or large businesses. It's part of the amenities that our workforce want when they go out on weekends or after the workday to go see a show or ballet or whatever that might be. So that's a really important piece of our future growth. And then maybe this one question, Jesse, you can answer for me. So we talked about the 97% of our businesses are still small businesses, which is great. What percentage, though, of our total workforce is small business versus large? Do you know that?
I do not know that off the top of my head. We can get that.
Okay, I'd love to know that stat when you get a chance. And then also, and I agree that Avalanche has done a good job, but I'm glad that Councilmember Stokes did mention a couple of pieces there that they may have been reading some old reports about Bellevue College's ability. But the economic diversity piece, too, is very interesting because, I think we have to look at Bellevue's strengths as well. And I'm not sure that we can always be all things to all people all the time from an economic perspective. I think Bellevue, does certain things really well, and sometimes we need to focus on those things that we do really, really well. So I'd be also interested in what Avalanche has to say in terms of, there's a certain thing called brand extension that you never want to go too far to offer everything, and then you don't really become known for anything then as well, right? So we kind of lose the message there. So this kind of goes back to the communication piece as well, but really good report. Really look forward to seeing what Avalanche comes back with, and specifically on the actual tactics and the execution of this. But thanks for the update.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. A lot of information. Data and data analysis is good, but I think I appreciate what Deputy Mayor said. It's what we do, how do we develop. Data is just less information, which is what we need. But ultimately, it's got to be boiled down to something that we can work with, we can do. And what will make most sense to do first, to be most successful, is what we're good at, what's our asset. And our asset is really technology, high technology. Right now, it's big data, artificial intelligence, and the second is these are universal, they're global. So I think we need to really focus on those, those aspects which we are good at, which we have the ability to build. We have a community that's very global, very diverse. We have companies that attract global talents here. So these are the things we can emphasize. And I believe that economic development obviously is important to me. I think I'm always been economic development because success comes from successful economy. If you don't have a successful economy, everything else is just dream, right? And we have a lot of things we want to accomplish. And the same thing. So same thing with the economic development. I like the fact that we're getting a lot of data. Good, getting understanding of what we are. But eventually, these are details. Not details. These are information that allow us to make decisions and choices, develop strategies. So I think we need to have a good sense from people who are experiencing, who knows, from the council, from other successful business people, what are the more likely things that we can do, and things that we want to do. Obviously, there's a choice involved. We don't want to be a economy that generate a lot of coal, have coal plenty. No, we never be like that. So I think it's how we're going to use this. So my sense is that let's take a look at, based on the information data you've analyzed, then we need to look at what are the strengths that we have and what we want to use as our strength. I think it's pretty obvious. Again, technology, global perspective, and we have to develop, talents. Talents meaning schools, education. That's important. And obviously, there are a whole bunch of other things. That's what makes economic development complicated. We have to talk about other things. We have to talk about roads, services, public safety. All these are elements. We need to emphasize those things. We need to figure out how to make sure that we are the place where people want to come to live, to do business, to raise family. I think that's the bottom line. So I think the basic feeling, value are pretty much the same. So I think we need to focus on not just doing everything or the data we want, but the data that is really practical, important, that we can implement. Because if we do study, we can study for 10 years. And what are you going to do? Ultimately, the 7 of us has to make the tough choices with your recommendations. So I hope we get there. So I'm not going to go into all the details. There's a lot of things everybody wants, but we can't do it. If we do that, we're not going to make anything happen. Okay, we just need to figure out how to do it and get it, make it going. Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Ragsdale.
All right. Thank you for all the work that you're doing on the Economic Development Plan update. And, excuse me, I'm getting over something, but a lot of encouraging data here. I think I've shared with you too, that when I think about economic development, I think of it as like similar to looking at the city through a product lens, right? And so in doing so, as you can imagine, as a user experience researcher, right, that means that we have an experience for the people who live, work, and play in our community. So that being said, while we can't be all things to everyone, I do think that we have to make sure that we are providing a quality experience for everyone that lives, works, and plays in our community. I do have one question in terms of the poverty rates. So does the poverty rate currently apply only to the people who live in Bellevue?
Correct.
So our poverty rate could be artificially low if people are being pushed out of the community?
That is a possibility,
okay,
depending on relocations.
Okay. So, obviously affordability is a big piece and a priority, I think, of the council and for me, for sure. And so given the amount of retail and the contribution that retail plays in our economy. I think it's important to make sure that we do what we can to provide housing for people who support that economy or retail. So I guess one of my questions is, or one of my asks would be, I know we have our affordable housing strategy. If the consultant also has any additional strategies or recommendations, I'd like to see that. And that also goes for ways that we can support our mom and pop shops, our micro businesses, so strategies along those areas in our creative economy. In terms of nightlife, I think I've mentioned, I think most people know that this is kind of an important deal for me. I work with folks who around 3:30, 4 o'clock, they're like, I gotta leave, make sure I get across the bridge or whatever, wherever they're going before traffic gets bad, right? And that's essentially money that's leaving Bellevue, right? So the more that we can encourage people to hang out in Bellevue after hours or come over to Bellevue to hang out on the weekends, I think that's a plus, and that helps boost our sales tax revenue and improves the experience in Bellevue as well. So in terms of the communication, you mentioned that there are people who this was their first time they had been brought together, and that provided a positive experience. And I've been sort of plugging this a little bit since my onboarding, and that is a community engagement framework. So ways that we can bring the community together outside of project-specific moments. So any recommendations along those lines would be encouraged. Thank you.
I was just going to say, Mac, maybe when you bring back our affordable housing strategies, you could underscore some of the strategies that we have that maybe we have or have not yet implemented that would support small business owners. Okay, great. Thank you. So I just have a couple of comments. I have a question. Is it safe to assume that software development is our top IT industry? Is that what you came up with?
Software publishing, yes.
Yes, publishing, okay. And so I really wanted to talk just briefly about the workforce development piece, because in my mind, this is a really, I agree with so much of what my colleagues have said here, but this is the one place where I felt it kind of missed the mark. And I was wondering where they got the data on the education required for the tech jobs in our city. Was that recently? Did they go out and get that just recently? Or were they working off of some data that was collected a while ago? Or I'm very curious because it does not reflect any of the conversations that I have with the industry leaders in the tech field in Bellevue. So, and when and it kind of ignores the fact, I mean, given that we're maybe one of the top third educated cities of our size in the United States, it kind of ignores the fact that we have a lot of people re-entering the workforce that are very highly educated. And I think they could probably get back in with a certificate program or a year or two, and it really doesn't address that. And I like this workforce development piece to go a lot further into how we can rejuvenate the workforce that we currently have right now so that the people who already own homes can get a higher salary and stay here and continue working rather than importing all these people for these jobs who maybe can never afford to live in the city. So it seems to make sense to me. So I don't know if that's feedback you can give to them or not.
We will give that feedback to Avalanche, and we did ask them for some details on the data sources that they used for the tech hiring jobs. And
it was the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I don't know the exact date, but it was recently, probably the most recent data set that the Bureau of Labor
Is that a United States statistics?
Right,
so being how unique
Bellevue.
This community is, do you think we could ask them to go out and actually analyze the companies that we have in Bellevue that are going to be bringing in thousands of tech jobs and find out what type of requirements that are going to be required educationally?
We can connect them. So Bellevue College and a couple of other workforce providers were engaged during the focus groups. We can also connect them with the WTIA, and they did interview with Amazon, but we can follow up with them on specifically around workforce.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to go to some of our companies here that will be hiring, maybe Amazon or something, and say, you know, what kind of education are are you going to require of the people you hire? Is it a 4-year degree? Is it an advanced degree? Is it something that requires 6 months of a intense coding program in addition to what they already have? I mean, there's lots of ways to look at this, and I'd sure want to make sure that we're utilizing the resources that we have in our city. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next we have the fire prevention activity update.
Mayor, thank you, Mayor and council members. As you mentioned, the next topic is one was a holdover from a prior meeting. And just by way of background, as part of the budget development for the biennial budget, the council authorized 2 additional fire prevention officer inspecting positions to perform more inspections on behalf of the city. Tonight, staff are going to share with the council the impact that these hires have made in terms of, in terms of fire prevention within the city. This again is more information for the council and information push out to the council. It's a good news story. Joining us this evening is Fire Chief Jay Hagan. To his left is Ken Carlson, the fire marshal, and to Ken's left is Kevin Carlin, also assistant fire marshal. So, Jay.
Thank you. Good evening. Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhaus, City Manager Miyake, members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to spend about 15 minutes with you this evening. This presentation is informational in nature, and it's about a fire prevention update. And I'd like to lead off by saying that the fire department would like to issue a sincere thank you to the council for providing 2 additional fire inspectors last year. And the main purpose of the presentation tonight is to share with you some of the good news about the work we were able to accomplish in 2019. As I'm fond of saying to City Manager Miyake, we talk about an ounce of prevention being worth 10 pounds of response. And so I just would like to remind you about the blended strategy we have, that we want to locate and mitigate hazards that we find in our community. We find those every day. But we also have to be prepared to respond quickly and effectively when we do have emergency incidents and fires, and so we utilize that blended strategy. I'd ask you to please listen for 4 themes this evening. The first one is that regarding inspections and our degree of being caught up, we're more caught up now than we have been in some time, completing 100% of fire inspections in 2019. With the assistance you provided last year, we were able to give each Bellevue firefighter 16 hours of fire prevention training, so we're better trained to conduct high-quality inspections in the community. On the heels of DS moving to complete paperless systems, we similarly have left paper behind and are moving to a tablet-based system for recording our inspections. And we'd like to conclude by sharing with you about the outreach efforts with the business community and what we heard from them and what we learned. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our Fire Marshal, Ken Carlson.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening. So, as the Chief said, we're here just to provide information. We don't need any direction, but we will certainly take any that you would like to share with us. We have a short agenda. As the Chief said, we'll spend about 15 minutes with you tonight. We're going to start first by talking about what the department's all about, and that's community risk reduction. We talk about 5 E's. Tonight we're going to really focus on education, enforcement, and engineering. And those balance out the emergency response that the Chief spoke about. I'll also touch at some point on the economic incentive. But the way that we're here mostly to talk about fire prevention. So just an overview of what we do. So we inspect every building in Bellevue and our contract cities. And our focus is on trying to identify code violations, things that are going to get occupants and residents in trouble, and try to educate them on what they need to do to correct them. And at the end of the day, it's all about reducing the risk to the community. You might be interested in understanding who does the inspections. It's a blend of both our firefighters housed at our 9 fire stations as well as fire prevention officers. Our firefighters inspect structures up to 3 stories in height for several reasons. One, to keep them close to their response apparatus so they can respond to calls when they come in. The other is to focus their skill set on things that don't take the in-depth training that the fire prevention officers need. The added staff that the that the council provided to us in 2019 were fire prevention officers. Fire prevention officers are tasked with inspecting high-rise structures and other complex buildings that take a lot of training and ongoing skill development. And that's where we saw the additional staff. As the chief mentioned, we moved from not being very caught up to completely caught up. So in 2017, we were only able to do 3/4 of our assigned inspections. 2018, we made some improvements, and last year, with the addition of the 2 fire prevention officers, we managed to accomplish all of our inspections, which is a pretty big accomplishment. I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Fire Marshal Kevin Caroline, who's going to talk about some real examples that were part of kind of routine inspections that occurred in 2019 and the significance of those. So,
all right, thanks, Ken. As manager of the fire inspection program, first I want to say how proud I am of the firefighters and the fire prevention officers for what they accomplished this year. There's no doubt they make Bellevue a safer place to live, work, and play. You just heard that we completed our inspections that were assigned this year, but really we have an ongoing job. It's basically endless as we keep the city a safer place. Think about any building you go into, right? We're creatures of habit. We usually use the same door. We always see other doors all around, and we assume they're free and clear. We see the exits in the back. Now, luckily, they don't get used a lot, but the workers get complacent, and they might use it for storage and block the exit with stock, some extra chairs. Maybe they're going to put the garbage out later, right? So in this example here, this is actually a vestibule that was shared by 2 businesses, and one was following our example, except they were blocking the other neighbor's exit. So we clear this up with education and enforcement. And when I say enforcement, really what I'm saying is we document it and then we give a reasonable amount of time. Obviously exiting is a very short time frame, but as far as heading to a hearing examiner or what, that is only a handful, if any, a year. Next, please. Okay, here's another exiting issue. It's a real common thing we run into here. This is an exit stairway door in a high-rise building that's been occupied about 2 years. If you look at the door on the left, there was a lock added, and the door on the right it's the same door, but the original approved hardware was reinstalled on it. So as buildings start to come online and function, they sometimes find they have security issues they need to deal with. So in this case, building management put a lock in, gave residents the code, and felt like they solved the problem. But this parking garage also serves other businesses, so they created an exiting problem. So instead of going 100 feet to the protected stairwell, you would actually have to run up the ramps about 1,000 feet to get out. Again, education and enforcement, and in this case, we helped them with the permitting process to get a code-approved solution that worked for everyone. Next one. So this is just like, you know, my kid's dream, going to school every day. But as beautiful as this is, the fire code doesn't allow that. And why? Well, the fire code states that you can only cover the wall with 20% combustible materials. And when you hear, according to the NFPA, there were almost 4,000 fires last year in K through 12. And of those, 47% were intentionally set. You realize this is important, but you also realize when we give the why behind the why, it's very effective for what we do. Thanks.
So the chief talked about the additional training that we were able to do. It's been a long time since we've had the bandwidth to be able to provide training to firefighters that are doing the inspections. So with the additional staff, we were able to resume providing fire prevention, fire code training to firefighters. And that has some very tangible benefits. We're able to deliver high quality inspections. Our staff were able to consistently apply the code. And we're also able to get credit, if you will, for Washington Survey and Rating Bureau. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on as well. Chief talked about moving from paper to digital. We spent a good part of last year evaluating different software solutions. We've been using a solution that was great at the time that was implemented 15 years ago, but we've quickly outpaced that. So mid-year, Kevin and his staff were able to identify a solution that's been used by a number of our neighbors. signed a contract and have been spending the last 6 months actually getting that up to speed and performing training so that when we rolled around to the first of this year that we were ready to go. This was foundational to being able to implement the fire inspection fee. Without this, we couldn't have done it. Some of the benefits that we're able to realize is that everybody that's out doing an inspection, whether they're a firefighter or a fire inspector, has real-time information to that building at their fingertips. Customers, when they're provided instantaneous results from the violations that have been written up, can also log on for certain types of violations, attest to the fact that they've been corrected, upload photographs, saving us the trip back out there and saving them the time that they would have otherwise reserved, to meet us. So we're going to be able to realize some efficiencies for that. And like I said, it was foundational to implement the fire inspection fee program. Chief talked about the outreach that we did. The added staff gave us bandwidth that really allowed us the time when we did the inspections last year to message, hey, we're implementing a new inspection fee, answer any questions that people had, collect feedback that they had, and we brought that feedback back here to City Hall. We really worked hard to revise the ordinance that we brought back to you in December that hits, we think, all the marks. Told you when we brought it back in December, it's still probably not perfect, but it's a lot farther along because of that time that we were able to take when we did the inspections and collect that feedback. I want to take an opportunity to do a little show and tell here. Since August of last year, we've had 6 fires in the downtown core, 6 of which were saved by sprinklers. So you're going to be looking at 2 sprinklers as you pass them around. One has a little bulb in it and one doesn't. Ordinarily, they have a bulb in them. When the temperature reaches, in this particular case, 155 degree Fahrenheit, that bulb breaks and it lets the water that's stacked up behind it loose. It's on duty 24/7, 365 days a year, ready to take care of whatever comes its way. So 6 times between August and the end of the year, we had fires in the downtown core. And I just want you to imagine, as I'm walking through these slides, the difference between these sprinklered and unsprinklered. So in an unsprinklered building, and we have a lot of them in Bellevue, some don't even have an alarm system in it, you have an amount of time between discovery, call to 911, crews getting dispatched, getting into their rig, rolling up to the scene, connecting the hose, and getting into the building to actually put water on the fire. And this happens instantaneously. This particular slide is in a hotel downtown. There was a fire in the dryer, and a single sprinkler head put out that fire, and nobody that was in the hotel had to go anywhere that night. It was put out before we ever arrived on scene. And contrary to what you see in the movies, all the heads don't go off. It's only the one head that's one, or sometimes it takes 2 or more, but in most cases it's a single sprinkler head that will extinguish that fire, or at least keep it under control until we get there. 4 of those 6 fires that I talked about happen to be in multifamily buildings, and this is a trend that we're paying attention to. They all happened when people were moving into the apartments. And as they're moving in, last time any of you moved, you know how chaotic that gets. So people are stacking stuff wherever they can, and they happen to stack it on top of their stovetop, inadvertently had bumped a knob on the stovetop, started that up, and in each one of these cases, you've got some combustible material that, if left unchecked, is going to cause big problems. And again, with the exception of the affected unit, nobody in these buildings had to spend a night anywhere but in their own unit. Pretty remarkable. And again, just imagine the contrast between a sprinklered and an unsprinkled building. These sprinkler buildings, we have to pay attention to them too, because if they're not inspected and maintained, they're not going to function. So that's something else that we pay attention to. Also wanted to spend just a minute talking about some things that are coming your way. In this first quarter, it's all about getting our fire inspection fee up and running. We've been doing inspections already. There's invoices that will be going out before the end of the month. Hopefully that all goes just smooth as silk, but we're in that mode right now. In quarter 2, we'll have Washington Survey and Rating Bureau that will come. They come every 5 years, and they evaluate every community in the state of Washington. So they were last here in 2015. And what they do is they evaluate sort of every aspect of our ability, our community's ability, to deal with fires. They're funded by insurance companies, and they evaluate the fire department operations, so the rigs, the crews, the equipment. They evaluate our dispatch center. They evaluate our water supply and what they call fire safety control, which is fire prevention. And together, they add up to what our classification is. We were a Class 2 in 2015. Our goal is to maintain that rating. Each of our contract cities, with the exception of Beaux Arts Village, went from a Class 3 to a Class 2. The reason that they're a Class 3 is their water system. They have their own independent water system, so they don't have the benefit of our really verbose water system. So our hope is to maintain that Class 2 rating, and we'll share that when it's complete. So we're working on that right now. And then last but not least, we'll be back here March 30th to give you kind of an overview of things coming in the 2018 fire and building codes, both at the national level and the state level, as well as things that we're contemplating proposing for amendments that will come back in early June. They'll go into effect statewide on July 1st. So that's kind of what's coming from our perspective between now and middle of the year. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you might have.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Councilmember Barksdale, do you have any comments or questions?
No questions. Just great to see the impact. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. Question curious about the sprinkler. You show us two. One has that red bulb. Is it the red bulb is the one that I use? The other one isn't?
So
what's the difference? Yeah.
The difference is imagine in each of those fires. Yeah. So this is what it looked like before the fire. Right. This is what it looked like after the fire. So the little bulb breaks when it hits that temperature. Oh. And once it breaks, then the plug that's in here releases, and water that's sitting right here then is discharged.
I see. I see. So there's water there.
There's water right at that point.
Okay.
And
so
this bulb is the only thing that keeps it.
Maybe the bulb actually initiates the water flow, but it really doesn't. The water's already there.
The water's there, correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Think of it like a hose bib, and it automatically turns on when it hits temperature.
Thank you.
I'm so glad it's heat and not smoke, because I was always afraid to move to a condo. Sprinkler.
Yeah. Second question: the contractor cities with us. Do we kind of update our contract with them as we provide more services and better services, or do you do it on the regular basis when they come back?
Thank you, sir.
What's the provision?
We do review our contract with those cities on a 10-year basis, and I think we're about 2 years in to a current 10-year agreement.
So it's 10 years. We're locked in for 10 years.
Yes, sir.
Do you recommend us to consider in the future to, beside a regular 10-year, but if there's any improvement we put in, any additional things that cost us money, is there any consideration that we can, negotiate?
There is, Councilmember Lee. We do meet with them on a regular basis. I consider myself their fire chief as well, and we meet with them routinely. We keep them informed on incidents in their communities and what's happening in Bellevue and with the fire department. And I think that annual review seems to be working pretty well.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Newhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. Great job, and thank you for all you do to keep Bellevue businesses, residents, our workforce, employees, et cetera, all safe. This is great news, and the 100% is just fantastic. And thanks as well for using technology here for reporting. And I don't know if our director of IT can use any of this for our Digital Cities Awards next year, but it's a great use of technology, and can see the absolute benefit to this, keeping our firefighters safe as well when they go into a fire or a place of hazardous materials. So great job all around. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you for the information. It's good to see that adding just 2 more people created this type of impact. I also appreciate the training, because I think sometimes it can be the head down, getting the work done, and we lose sight of the fact that it's the training that helps us look at what is the best in class, what are others doing, and how do we ratchet up ourselves in terms of that. So I appreciate that. And then the real-time data, I think, is really, really helpful. I guess my question would be, when you look at the violations, what percentage of them tend to be one that can be fixed right away, like the Carta stuff that's just blocking the door, versus ones where they actually have to do more work to make sure that the sprinklers are operational? I'm just trying to get a sense for that.
Yeah, I couldn't give you a percentage, but I will say more than not are behavioral issues where it's blocking things, storage that affects the sprinkler. So they tend to be mostly just low cost, change
Easy
the
to
behavior.
fix type of items, because I was wondering, as you look at, are there any trends from the standpoint of behaviors that are getting better, and also behaviors that we're seeing that is not as good for fire prevention?
Well, one of the areas that we struggle the most likely place we're going to have a fire is where you live, and the most likely cause of the fire is cooking, usually unattended cooking. So that's a behavioral thing, and we try really hard to get that message out. Every year we have an open house. We provide cooking demonstrations. We constantly push that message out. But at the end of the day, everybody's living a busy life. You get that phone call. Something pops up on TV. The doorbell rings, and you forgot that you got something on the stove. So we're constantly trying to get at that, and that's really not an inspection issue. Again, like Kevin said, that's a change the behavior issue.
Yeah, I can see that, because I know sometimes we use cooking oil, and the way that we cook is also on higher heat, and so the ability to understand those kind of risks and challenges. So
sometimes we can't solve problems just by changing behavior, and that's where the engineering part of the equation comes in. So if we put an engineering solution like a sprinkler in, that can make the difference between a big deal and not such a big deal.
So the 5,000 tenants that we inspected, do they all have sprinkler heads, both wet or dry?
So when you think about residents, you've got residents in multifamily buildings. All newer multifamily buildings have to be sprinklered, but the old ones, that wasn't a requirement. So the older ones don't, and most single-family homes, particularly the older ones, don't. So
when we inspect them, we're inspecting to make sure that they actually have a smoke alarm then, because they don't have sprinklers? I'm just trying to understand.
So part of our program, and Kevin can speak to this as well, is to make sure we don't go into individual dwelling units. So we try to come up with strategies that get at your question. So we have forms to ask them to verify, do you have alarms in all of these places? Have you changed the alarms out in the last 10 years? And so that's a focus, because if they're not there, they're not working, they're not in the right places, they haven't been changed out, they're not going to do any good. So we try our best to communicate what the requirements are. We're not going to be 100% successful, but that's a focus.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's tough to actually get to 100%. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Robertson.
This is just a great report. This is just a good news story. And I'm so proud of our fire department for being so proactive. We are reactive as well when we need to be, but being proactive can do a lot more. So thank you so much.
Councilmember Stokes.
You're the best. Thank you.
Yeah, I will. Are you? Is that it? I will just add that your ears must have been burning on Saturday when we were doing the groundbreaking for the new mosque, because your response there was just incredible. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, I am going to give us a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back at 20 till, according to that clock, or sooner. I know. All right, let's resume our meeting. I believe next up we have a preview of regional issues for 2020.
That's correct. Thank you, Mayor and council members. It is our monthly regional issues meeting. Tonight you are going to get a preview of the what we consider to be some of the more substantive regional issues that will be in front of the council for this year. You have a potential list of those. Actually, it was included in your desk packet this evening, and Joyce Nichols, our intergovernmental director, is going to go through those with you and answer any questions you might have. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Joyce.
Great, thank you very much. As Mr. Miyake said, tonight's kind of a preview, the trailer before the attraction actually starts. We did a list last year in January and presented it to council, and it was just a running tally of what issues we thought were likely to, come up, be addressed, or emerging issues that we thought might come out of nowhere. And we listed those, and for us, and I think for some council members, it provided an opportunity to track our progress. Go back and say, did we really brief you on that? What happened with that particular issue? And last year was filled with a lot of transportation issues because those were some of the issues that were in the fore for the better part of the year. This year, we have a new list, and what you'll find is that many of the issues, or several of the issues, are holdover issues. Because on the regional arena, sometimes problems don't get solved just in 1 year. Sometimes some contracts that we've negotiated with some entities take 16, 17 years to do. Those are long-term contracts that bind the city's interests, so you want to make sure you get it right. We've only got 1 or 2 of those on the issue list tonight. But we thought what we might do is tell you a little bit about some of the issues that are going to be front and center right away, as they are carryovers from last year. And one of those is the Regional Homelessness Authority, which is a new government structure that was created in late December as a result of some work that was done by Seattle, Mayor Jenny Durkin and King County Executive Dow Constantine. And they, a couple of years ago, were working with consultants, and they were trying to figure out what is wrong or what can be done to address the regional homelessness delivery system in the county to make improvements that could avoid duplication, provide more direct services to people in need, and do that in a more cost-effective and efficient way for the people who were experiencing homelessness. They convened several consultants, and those consultants did work for the better part of a year, analyzing the situation, interviewing people in the communities around King County, and then comparing us with the nation. And as a result of that, they issued reports that said some of the things about the system here in King County were kind of out of whack. They felt like there was not a good level of accountability in some of the areas. They did feel there was a duplication of services. They felt sometimes that if you were a person experiencing homelessness, you might go in to get a laundry chit to get your laundry done, take a shower, and take care of your personal hygiene, but you might be asked to fill out a survey that had no relevance to just needing to get your laundry done. So they were looking at a broad brush of things that could make this better. And so this regional authority was debated for the better part of last year, and through that debate, there was an effort to involve the cities that were outside Seattle. And the 3 people representing the Sound Cities Association were the mayor of Auburn, Nancy Backus, the council president in Renton, who's Ed Prince, and our former mayor, John Chominak. And that legislation that passed in December created this new group, this Regional Homelessness Governing Authority. And there are going to be 3 members from Sound Cities on that, 3 from the Seattle City Council, or including the council and mayor, and the same from the county. And then there'll be people on that board who have lived experience of homelessness, either through direct experience or expertise in that particular field. And this group is, one of the reasons we called it out is they're doing their storming and norming right now. And they're going to be forming themselves by March, so during the first quarter of the year. And then they expect to start work to create the next board down, which is going to be the implementing board. And that's going to be made up of people with various types of expertise from throughout the community. And there won't be elected officials per se on that board. So that'll be people with, psychological experience, behavioral experience, those kinds, real estate people, development people, people who work in the field of homelessness and creating housing for people who are homeless. So that group is going to be created after this, after the governing board is seated. And we are going to need to be involved in the discussions there, not only because of the impact on Seattle and King County, but one of the focuses of the group that was created is going to be sub-regional planning. So the south part of King County will probably plan as a whole. The east side of King County, of which we will be part, will do some planning. And we will need to participate with our sister cities on the east side to continue working together to solve some of these homelessness issues. We have a good track record so far of having worked together on the whole issue of how to create shelters for homeless individuals, and we'll now have to start working together to formulate a plan. And that won't happen until probably the second quarter of the year when the homelessness group gets going. That was one group that we thought was worth calling out. There's another group that's the Regional Affordable Housing Committee. And that group, we have our mayor serving on that group, Mayor Robinson, and she's appointed through the Sound Cities Association. That group is doing the implementation plan for the Regional Affordable Housing Task Force, on which Councilmember Stokes served, which spent about a year or so developing the body of information about affordable housing and how to create more, how to get it done, and how to assess the need and develop a plan around that. That information was turned over to the group that the mayor's now sitting on, and that group is going to be working to implement the recommendations of this committee. That work is ongoing into this year, but you need to understand that the framework for that was set up a couple of years ago. So we thought it was good to just give you a heads up about those two issues. Another one that's going to be a doozy is the whole issue around bus service and transit. As you know, with the passage of Initiative 976, there's a pretty big gap between the funding and the dollars to pay for regional transit services. And so there will be several groups that are going to be working on how do we fill that gap and how do we address the needs of all of King County for transit service. And that will mostly start with the county's regional transit committee. And Councilmember Robertson is serving on that committee, being appointed through the Sound Cities Association. That group is going to be looking at, over the course of the next year, they're going to be looking at the county Metro's strategic plan for bus service. They're going to be looking at the Metro Connects, which is the long-term vision for transit service in the county, and then they'll be looking at the service guidelines. And over the course of the next several months, they'll receive briefings on those while looking at the map and saying, where do we need to align these three different plans to come up with a proposal for transit service that serves the whole county? And our proposal, or one of the things we really need, is for transit to follow jobs and housing. So we're looking to provide better transit for folks on the east side, better connections within the east side of the county, and then better connections to the other job centers where people who live in Bellevue need to go every day to go to work. So that's going to be an ongoing effort. And then each and every one of you have assignments that you're working on these external committees. And what we do as staff is we put together briefing papers for you before you go to the meetings. We give you annotated agendas. We do whatever it takes to help you understand the issues, know what the other county or other cities in the county's interests are, and what our own interests are, so that you can best represent the residents and businesses in Bellevue as you go to these meetings. So that was the point of doing this list, and I would be happy, to talk about any of the things that are on it, provide any more information, or whatever would be your pleasure.
Thank you very much. Was that a small? Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Robertson.
Yeah, whatever, no rush. I just wanted to ask a couple questions on the Regional Homeless Authority Governing Board. I believe I was at the Sound Cities board training, and I think they said that it's going to be, the Sound Cities reps are going to be Nancy Backus, Ed Prince, and is it Angela Burney?
Angela Burney, Mayor of
So we have two cities that touch us, having reps. So I assume that we want to work very closely with those two representatives as well as Sound City staff as a
Yes.
whole on that.
And with our King County Council representatives as well.
That's critical. So on the implementation board, you talk, and we saw this information several months ago when it was being formed, but I just don't remember the answer to this. On the implementation board, you talked about them having experts. Are they gonna have any reps from police, fire, EMT, or emergency rooms? Because those folks are the front line, and they could add a lot of knowledge to the implementation. Will those be, any
There
of
was
those
a
four groups
proposal
be
to
recommended?
add some of those particular positions and expertise, especially the public safety and the emergency services, I believe.
Perfect, that's, great minds think alike. And then are you gonna get to the legislative, the state legislature and talk about, okay, I'll hold those questions or comments then till later, but we have a lot of work ahead, so, and if folks wanna talk about the Regional Transit Committee, I'm happy to talk about what we're doing there. But that is gonna be a really heavy lift, with these three big plans that are gonna be really fast-tracked, and to make sure that we don't move away from some of those really important factors of where transit goes, like the jobs, following the jobs and housing. There's a risk that that could happen this year with some of the things that are in play. It's too early to say, but I think Sound Cities will be working to make sure that the transit follows jobs and housing. So that's one of the things I'm going to be working like a busy little beaver on. So thanks.
Great, and I think that's a good example. So as we go around, if you're on one of these commissions that you want to speak to, that would be great to have some information. Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, back on the homeless thing, a little more of the history on that. We've gone over this before. We had Leo Floor from the county here, but actually, I want to illustrate a bigger point that, and what Councilmember Robertson was talking about, too. The importance of our participation on these regional boards and committees, and Bellevue's participation in all of these different things is so crucial, and that's a big part of our the whole strategy on this. And what happened, and Joyce gave a real skimpy version of what took place at that time on this, and actually the work that was done by the group didn't quite, it was kind of frustrating, and we got, as you know, a package that had basically the Sound Cities and anybody cut out of it except one position, and you know, if 10 people joined the ILA, you could get maybe another one kind of thing, and it was the electeds were shut out of any policy, and the policy was going to be handed to the group that's working on this and the other way around. So because we were represented on the Regional Policy Committee, and because I was the chair of the caucus, SA caucus and vice chair, I got the opportunity, as we did on the solid waste stuff, to be able to articulate, along with Angela Burney and others, what we wanted in this and why it was important to have policymakers in and have a board, a policy board, or the board that would come up with the overall policies and the budget and all that, and get the advisory committee, which acts as the implementation committee. And I first used that term, and we got that turned around and got 3 positions added to it. So from SCA, and that took a lot on it, but what was good about it was actually working with, and the other important thing of working with in PSRC and also at the regional level is working with county council members. And having 3, my working relationship with Pete Von Reichbar, the chair of the committee, and with Jeannie Cole Wells and Rod Dembowski, all working together and actually advocating for the cities to be involved, I think was a very positive impact. And again, it just illustrates, and I think Councilmember Robertson is going to be doing this in the transportation part on this with the impact of the all the transportation things that are going on, is that we can really speak up for, but not only just Bellevue, but for the region, because it's all tied together. And I just wanted to illustrate that that's why it's important that we do these things, and we have, I think, the best staffing. I always feel like I'm really suited up well going into these meetings, and that's important to us too. So these are opportunities, and I think, we'll be talking about these things at the retreat, I think, and just in general, is these are the opportunities that we have as a council and as a city to make impact, and it's by utilizing these particular things. But I'm excited about the housing, the homeless thing. And one last thing I want to say about this as a precursor, we'll have more discussions, but yes, there is a plan for sub-regional planning. And I hate that idea of sub-regional. It's like, it's like suburbs, like you said. But it's, and the idea is that somewhere next year, 3 years from now, 5 years, they'll kind of come up with this plan. What we've already talking about, and talking with Angela and Nancy Bacchus and Ed, and I think there are 3 great people to be on that committee, and Nancy's representing the South End, and Angela was on the RPC and spoke out, is we can go ahead and start doing our sub-regional planning now. We can start working with Redmond and Kirkland and Issaquah, and actually going up to Shoreline and up to Bothell, and start working with them. And Nancy will start working with the South End groups, and because we have this opportunity now to work with it, and we're not, it's not the same as what's going to happen in Seattle. It's doing our work, so it's exciting. But I just want to illustrate that these are the areas. That's why we put a lot of energy into the regional pieces, is because it has a great impact, positive impact for Bellevue.
Thank you. Councilmember Barksdale.
I don't have any comments at this time.
Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. I do have some questions. I think, these are important topics. It affect the cities and affect the region. But I believe that, I'm concerned about the scope, who is driving it and what's the agenda. The city of Seattle, King County, Seattle especially, has its own challenges. Okay, so I believe most of these solutions has to come from cities themselves, from us. We know where the problems are, we can address it. We have particular problems that we can handle, and there's a reason for setting up regional bodies to solve these problems, because they cannot do it themselves. So I understand that, and I guess we probably have to chip in for whatever we can do. But I don't want to have somebody else set up an organization, a regional body, and do plannings for us, for our cities, unless we need their help. But most of the time, probably doesn't need that much help. We handle our problems. We have great staff, great people, great government, great community, and we have, good economic resources. But I just want to be sure, we don't fall into a trap of just. I understand, I appreciate, and I respect the suburban cities because they share many of the same concerns that we have. So I think we're working together on that front. But I wanted to be clear that we're not going to come up with another regional solution, whether it be south, whatever, sub-regional or whatever regional. I want to be sure that we are there to make sure we are protected from being, sucked in with a solution that doesn't address our own problem. I don't want somebody else to tell us how to fix it. And so I'm concerned about this plan you're talking about, this implementation board is going to have come up with. I hope the plan is for, our own individual, management of our own situation, not a plan for everybody. If it works there, it works for us, no. One shoe doesn't fit all. So I want to be sure. I don't know, do you have any sense? Yes. This is a plan for all or plan for each of us, working, helping each other?
Well, many cities in King County voiced serious concerns of the type you're mentioning, especially around the Regional Homelessness Authority and what it was planning to do. And everyone was very, very united in saying one size does not fit all. So we don't want to marry ourselves to a plan that's going to work really well for Seattle, because many of the issues that Seattle's facing are different than the issues we're facing. And they're different from the issues in South King County and from North King County and from further out into the more rural areas. The problems are different, and that was the focus of the emphasis on sub-regional planning, was so that the East Side, for example, could come together as cities and say, here are our issues, here's our approach that we're going to take, and we're going to be looking for some funding for those plans that we would come up with on a regional, sub-regional basis. We'll be looking for funding from that, from King County and some of the levies that are currently in place. So there was a very big focus exactly on what you were speaking about. Okay. And the plan is to not have a cookie cutter approach, not just to take a Seattle focused approach. And we have 7 very strong voices that I'm sure would echo the concerns that you've raised.
Okay, well, I think that's the principle I would like to make sure that the city of Bellevue follows. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Nunez.
Thanks for that update, Joyce, and I want to thank Councilmember Stokes for doing some great work there, from getting literally from 1 SCAC to 3. I think without that, we probably wouldn't be talking about this homeless authority right now, quite frankly. So my only wish was that we had one of those seats. Not to be slight against those that do, but however, Bellevue being the largest city on the east side, the fact that we don't is concerning. So I share Councilmember Lee's concerns there. And do you have any insight when this sub-regional planning is going to get started and get going? Because certainly, I think for us, we want to be a part of it as quickly as possible. Do you have any insights on that?
I have some comments that I've heard. I haven't heard an actual plan for the sub-regional plan would begin on this date. Mm-hmm. The first thing that will happen is the creation and the settling in of the board. And then my guess is, somewhat educated guess, that they will then focus on the implementing committee and getting those expert panels up and running. Mm-hmm. And part of that would be focusing on the sub-regional planning as part of that effort. The group the governing board does not have an unlimited amount of time to address this.
Sure.
People are going to be watching very closely and monitoring results to see if any more people are housed at the end of 2020 than at the beginning of 2020. So I think it behooves all of us to urge the people that are in charge to get going on this.
Absolutely.
And especially on the sub-regional efforts, because we're ready to go, frankly.
But there will be then, it sounds as if there will be the flexibility that each sub-region can address this or approach this in a slightly different manner. Okay.
That's the thought.
That
yes.
is the thought. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. On 976 that you mentioned, and as it relates to transit, so there is an injunction currently right now on 976. So currently no transit is being, hopefully is impacting folks that are trying to, get to work, et cetera. It's not having any impact on those routes. And so
right.
Go ahead.
Not right now.
Not right, yeah.
But the injunction will last a certain amount of time, and then when the court actually does decide on the law as it relates to 976, then if it goes into effect, jurisdictions that are collecting those taxes would likely not be able to collect those if the wording and the intent of Initiative 976 goes into effect. Right now, I believe jurisdictions are continuing to collect those monies.
Yeah.
So far, so good. But one doesn't know when the actual decision will be made.
Right. Do we have no insights on when the court's going to take that up then, or when we know? Okay.
Not for sure.
Thank you.
I'm just going to ask you a question that I'll go to council members on. Is it possible for a representative from our council to attend these meetings on the regional homelessness authority?
Absolutely. I believe those meetings are public, open meetings, and
okay. So Councilmember Stokes, sounds like you're committed.
And on the sub-regional thing, I've already talked to Angela and Nancy, and It's okay, us not being on there. Yeah, we should be. We should have our own seat. That's another issue. But I think we have the ability to start working ourselves and putting this together, and a willingness. And yes, and to Councilmember Lee's, what we do in Bellevue is not going to necessarily the same things done in Redmond, but there are a lot of similarities, and people are all over the place. So it's a regional approach, but yes, each individual city will have the responsibility. And part of this is to make sure the money doesn't get just sucked out of our going over to this other solution.
Right.
And so we do have the opportunity to do that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you for providing this list of information. I think it's very helpful. Listening to the folks around the room and having been in the room with SCA along with Councilmember Stokes when all the cities around SCA were debating about this regional board, I mean, I think we've actually come a long ways from where it started. And my sense is that the fact that we have Mayor Backus and Chair Prince there with the synergy of and consistency of having been involved before, I think it's good. And then having Mayor Bernie, who has been on the Board of Health for a number of years, I think is also helpful, because although this governing board is around homelessness and specifically not around the root causes, I don't think you can really have this conversation without understanding what are some root causes that are driving homelessness, and I think she'll bring that voice. My sense is that some regional planning really is the key, and the cities are all raring to go. You know, my other sense is that from a regional perspective, we all need Seattle to be successful, because when they are not as successful, it impacts the entire region and how we, and the perception of how the region is around homelessness. So the more that they are able to be successful, I think the better off we are as a region, and so we want that. And I'd like to think that from their standpoint, they would also want us to be highly successful at addressing homelessness so that they're not the only ones in the community doing that. My comment is when I look at the whole list, there are a couple of pieces in here around community court in Bellevue and looking at that as a potential, and then some of these other pieces related to public safety. Do we have anyone that's on a committee looking at those, or how will we make sure we get a voice in those areas?
Well, community court is an opportunity, actually, that we'll be briefing council on in February. Community court represents an alternative problem-solving method that helps people who are misdemeanants get the services they need, get the help that they need if they have ongoing health or behavioral problems or addiction problems, or are having a hard time just staying out of the criminal justice system. It helps provide them an alternative. And it is something that is being done in 3 cities right now, and it's done under the King County District Court. And as you know, we contract with the King County District Court to provide services in our area. And they're doing this community court work now in Redmond and in Burien and in Shoreline. And the courts have been added in those areas as budget money becomes available at King County. So last year, we were hoping that the county would approve 2 new community courts. They only had funding for 1. So we're kind of next up, if you will.
Okay.
And so the briefing that we'll be bringing to council in February will lay out all the ins and outs of the community court and what it does and who it serves and how it provides the resources through a resource center, actually, in the physical location with the court to give people what they need in this wraparound services way to stay out of the criminal justice system. And there are many success stories from other parts of the country where they've been implementing community court over the past several years. And people are looking to it as another tool in the toolbox to help people who are struggling to get on their feet and, again, stay out of the criminal justice system. It costs more to house somebody in jail than it does to keep that person, in a regular kind of house every year. So the cost of not meeting people's needs is, pay now or pay later. And so community court is one option, and it's a real exciting opportunity if you hear what's been going on in the cities that have them now. Redmond has its facility located in the library, the King County Library, and staff have been, ever since we knew this opportunity might present itself, we've kind of quietly been talking to see where we might be able to find a location, and we'll have more information from you for you in February so that you can decide if you want to engage in this. You can include it in the budget planning for next year because there are some costs to a city to do this, and the county would then include it in its budget process for next year, and you could make sure that the arrangement would work out for both. But I think in terms of having another really good tool in the toolbox, this would be something that really should be considered.
Thank you. I'm excited about it too because I did hear about the successes that Redmond was having. So thank you for the thorough update.
Sure. So I'll just say, and I don't know if Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis will agree with this. It sounds a lot like our probation program that we already have in play. And so I would be curious of and when I was attending the mid-meeting where they described it, it sounded very much like that program, which has been very effective. So I'd be curious if there's an option to get funding for the county to continue with the program we have and maybe, boost it up if there's some parts of it that we're missing that they're willing to offer.
That is certainly a line of inquiry that we should be making.
Great.
Yes.
Any other questions? All right, thank you are you done with your presentation?
Well,
or did you have more?
I'm done with the list of coming attractions.
Okay.
But I wanted to just say a few things about what's going on down in Olympia. Not that there's too much to say. Well, it's a short session, and it's a good thing because I think there are 3,500 bills out there right now, and about 1,400 of them have dropped since January. So the task is monumental for the people who are trying to track every single bill. And it has been a quick start to the session. Instead of holding a lot of hearings, as they usually do during the first 2 weeks of session, they've actually been having hearings and moving bills, execing them out and trying to get them onto the floor. So things are moving quite fast. And one thing I wanted to make sure you knew is that this week the Association of Washington Cities is hosting its annual legislative conference in Olympia tomorrow and Wednesday. And there'll be a chance to have a reception type affair with our members of our legislative delegations, the 41st, the 48th, the 1st, and the 5th districts tomorrow evening. And then Wednesday morning, there are hearings that if council members are going down for the conference, they might want to attend as well. Again, pretty fast moving. In getting back to council's interest in making sure our legislative representatives understand Bellevue's interests and our position on many bills, we've scheduled a day in Olympia for council members who can make that work. February 5th, we'll go down to Olympia and we'll have meetings with all of our representatives. And this will be a much better way than trying to fit these meetings in during the AWC conference, because you have legislators or elected officials from the entire state trying to talk to their officials, and it is crowded. You get maybe 5 minutes because the legislators still have to go to their committee meetings and still have to do their work. But if you can catch them on a day when not everybody else is there, you have better luck. So we'll be planning those meetings. We'll get you a schedule. We'll get talking points. We'll have that all laid out for you before the 5th of February.
Terrific.
Yes. And then talking about bills, as we've said before, about the best I can say is that affordable housing, homelessness, and transportation funding are really the big issues. But another issue that has kind of taken over is the issue of local control, especially as it relates to zoning and density. And there are several bills, many of them ones that our certainly would take away your ability to regulate density in single-family neighborhoods. Several of those are being heard this week in committees in Olympia, and they would require us and we and other cities to take an entirely different approach to single-family neighborhoods than we have in the past. And it would take away your ability to make those decisions based on the needs and desires of the community in which you live and the people you represent. There is one good bill that's kind of a compromise, and we're hoping that that bill, in the House it's 2343, and in the Senate it's 6334. Those two bills appear to be a bit of a compromise that try to allow for density increases at the behest of the City Council. And you would be given options that you could, look at. And it isn't that you don't have those options right now, but these would be legislatively brought up options. And the goal is to increase densities as a way to solve the affordable housing crisis that we have. And while increasing densities is one way that that can be addressed, the thing that previous city councils have pushed for very hard in our current legislative agenda that you approved really stress local control. And so that's been our message, is we don't want to just give up control or give up having a say. You hold public hearings in which people who live in the community can come in and talk about what they like and what they don't like about proposals you're making. And we prefer, and previous councils have preferred, that those decisions be made locally. The state can certainly set the umbrella policies, but the actual decisions, it's always better if they're made locally. So we have a tough row to hoe on these bills, and I don't know whether any of the bad bills will get through, but our lobbyist, Brianna Murray, is working her, head off down there to make sure that people understand the position you've taken and understand the kinds of things that we're doing to increase density already, and how our light rail, our transportation systems, and our housing are interrelated. And we've made decisions at the council level on how the city's going to grow, and that you've made those decisions with intentionality, and that's paying off for us now, but we don't want to lose that. So that's the focus of the kinds of comments we're making on your behalf. And it'll be an exciting couple days for those of you who are going down. And then on the 5th, we'll have some more excitement. It is always fun to go to Olympia and actually see how the laws get made and how hard the people that represent us in Olympia really do work. So that's
great. Thank you. Okay, yes, Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you.
We'll go around if anybody really wants.
So, yeah, I'm really concerned about these density bills, some of which would require, duplex, triplexes, sixplexes on every single family lot. I think that the legislature, some of them come from local government, but the issue isn't just the effect on the transportation infrastructure, which people can see. It's the effect on the sewer pipes and the water pipes and the storm drain. This council, I'm sure, remembers that we did a very expensive sewer upgrade near Southeast 8th, specifically in order to serve the planned development in Wilburton. And so the cost, I think one of the things as we're talking to legislators, there's of course the density and people in single family neighborhoods who would be very worried about the impact of if their street has 10 houses, all of a sudden there are 60 dwelling units on that street. But it's also the impact on the infrastructure that we can't see. If we're going to have sewer breaks, if we're going to have more urban flooding because the storm drains don't work, if we don't have the water capacity to serve this development, I mean, those are huge issues. The other issue is by adding all that density on these lots, they have reductions in impervious surface and in tree retention. And we have very strong environmental rules when we updated our critical areas and when we updated some of our single family zoning for livability. This was 10, 12 years ago. we specifically looked at impervious surface because we don't want urban flooding, and we want to make sure we have green space, and we want to make sure that trees are retained, because all of that stuff is good for people living here. So I think that looking at it holistically, having mandated density of either double to 6 times current zoning capacity in single-family zones is very, very problematic. So I hope that AWC and many other cities and counties, the Washington counties, are all hip to hip with us on this, because I'm not saying density is not a good thing. Bellevue has a great growth plan, but it's not well thought out. And I think that we could, when sewer starts backing up in people's homes because there's no, how are some of these smaller cities going to pay for that? And how would Bellevue pay for that? So there's my little rant about that. The question I have also, this is really a big deal. This could be really bad for cities across the state if they mandate that. So I really hope those bills are amended into.
Can I just cut in for 1 second?
Of course.
I'm wondering, some of these are conversations that we have already had, and some of these are conversations we have yet to have. And they all revolve around affordable housing and our strategy and the implementation of some of the things that are recommended in the strategy. So I'm wondering, when is that coming back to us, and when do we have the conversations? Okay. Because I'm looking forward to that.
And you make a good point, Mayor, because the point is, I think, local control. If we know we want to add density here for more affordable housing, we will know what the sewer pipes and storm drains and water capacity is to serve that area. And we can upsize those pipes if we need to. But if it's just mandated, spread across, it's a real concern. So on the density options that you were saying we could opt in, what are the things that they're doing to make it easier? Is it things like waiving SEPA, no appeals to growth management hearing board,
Yes.
no requiring to go to commerce? Is it those kind of things?
Yes, and they're looking at making these increases in density optional. And there could be, one of the things I think AWC is trying to work into the discussion is what kinds of incentives could cities be offered? Where, at what point does the Public Works Trust Fund enter the conversation so that the infrastructure loan that might be needed in order to upgrade the pipes and pumps underneath the ground, where that might be covered? So there's a broader conversation to have on just what you bring up, which is how are not just the streets suited for this, but the things that are under the streets. There's also the issue of whether or not these bills would waive the requirement for off-street parking, and whether they would waive the requirements for attached dwelling units or detached units to have some owner-occupied person who owns it lives in one of those units. So there are requirements out there that could be optional, or you could waive the off-street parking if you did these things. So if you really want to approach it in that holistic way, you won't just look at mandating everybody do the same thing. You'd say, in this area, this makes sense to do. As you say, impervious surface and tree regulations, there are a whole lot of things. So, as usual, we encourage the holistic approach, but in a short session, it's really hard to get at those really hard discussions.
Right. It might also be helpful to yoke in some cities or counties that have water issues. Because if you add a whole lot more density, they don't have the fire flow capacity that they need. They don't have the water to serve those, and it causes a real public safety challenge as well as a problem with the State Department of Health in getting their water certification. So if you could have some examples of cities that have that on the impacts, that could be, I think, persuasive.
Right. I think the panels that AWC puts together for commenting at the public hearings include a variety of sized cities. So, City X can present the issues that it thinks are important, and I'm sure those cities are getting at those. And many of the cities in our state are represented by individual water and sewer districts, those who provide them those services, and those districts have an association which is, I am quite sure, weighing in on this as well.
great. So thank you for letting me talk about that. I appreciate it.
Are there any more comments or questions, council members on?
Yeah, so I see that there was one in here about MFTE, which was one of the things that we were very interested in, is to be able to expand that reach. So is that a bill that provides the kind of tool that we're looking for?
There are several bills that deal with MFTE. The concerns that Bellevue has expressed is that it remain an option, and that if there is an amendment that would extend the current 12-year exemption and the 8-year exemption that the state offers, would expand those to 24 years. Again, if that's optional, which the program is, that's possibly a good thing. The thing that cities have to look at, and we have to analyze, we're going to look at all of these bills, not just one at a time, but you have to look at how does the city want to increase affordable housing. And the MFTE is one tool to use to do that. But you have to analyze, for example, what you're paying out to the developer by way of this exemption versus if you spent that money doing something else, what would the result be? And you might decide they're both really good things to do. We can put city money in over here to augment the money that a nonprofit is doing in an affordable housing development. We can use the MFTE for this other kind of getting of affordable housing and increasing the supply. What we are asking the legislature to do is give us more tools, and some of those tools need to come with some funding. Last year they passed House Bill 1406, which allowed cities and counties to take a credit against the state share of the sales tax. That will have some, I think, immediate impacts because that money is starting to be collected right now and will go into the cities and the counties that have decided to use that feature. Things that help right now are really appreciated. So city staff will be looking across the spectrum of the MFTE bills, find the ones that get at the concerns that you've raised and what we think might be good information for you to determine how the city wants to increase affordable housing.
Right, because then we can look at advocacy for those as well.
Right.
So I agree with that. Having served on the Association of Washington Cities Legislative Committee, I think there was also discussion about increasing the Housing Trust Fund itself.
Yes.
Whether has that been discussed? Is
Yes,
there any
and
movement there?
that is almost a perennial request by cities because
is it getting any legs this year?
Well, it had a hefty increase last year, and we're hoping for the same again this year. Not sure that will happen, but that anybody interested in increasing affordable housing lobbies for that.
Okay, and then my last question is, we do have a plan for densifying, and in fact, we've actually upzoned for density in discrete areas where we have transit. So my question is, for some of these bills, if we have a sense that they might have legs and actually get moving, because my understanding is the legislature has been very busy and bills are moving very quickly, are there some where we could collaborate with others and come up with an amendment that would make them acceptable to us in terms of where if cities actually already have a plan for densification, then some of these pieces may not apply. So I'll just put that out there about instead of just killing bills, whether we can look at amendments that make them acceptable to us.
And actually that is what we're doing is we're working with other associations, the Association of Counties, the real estate folks, the developer communities, and we're trying to find what's that nice middle that helps advance the cause without creating onerous regulations and restrictions. And we're also trying, we always try to amend a bill so that we can get what it is that we need from it. And we like options. You focus on that a lot in your legislative agenda. Give us options and don't, again, make everything a cookie cutter. One size does not fit all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Joyce. Really appreciate it. I believe we are adjourned.